everybody, to the cutting room floor. My name is Wes. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace Church, and I am joined by the one and only Taylor Brown.
Hey.
Our teaching pastor, family pastor, and he was also our first writer yesterday.
Yes, I was.
And we were wrapping up this series on essentials, and you had a beautiful illustration about mosaics.
Yeah,
Can you just refresh our memory on that?
Yeah, so Pastor Sherry, who's our Fort Myers Shores campus pastor, she has this incredible ministry. I say hobby, but it's a ministry too.
Yeah.
Where she will do mosaic art, where she'll take, broken pottery, broken china, broken statues, all these broken things.
Yeah.
Has thousands of pieces, literally thousands of pieces in her studio. And she will take time to create art from all of those pieces and make some really beautiful things out of it.
Yeah, and they are remarkable.
Yeah,
So I brought an example for you. Now, you might not like it because, we're somewhat of rivals when it comes to college football, although today both of us are humble, I would think.
I think so,
This is University of Kentucky wear and
Look
colors
at
that Pastor Sherry made for me. If you're not able to see because you're just listening to the podcast, she was able to take tile and blue and white and put it together with, I think these are Scrabble pieces.
It is Scrabble,
and, and she put Kentucky on there, but then in the center is a mirror, and she put Cogpow below it, so that every time I look at it, I'm drawn to it, of course, because it's Kentucky, and she took a mug that was broken and made this beautiful thing. But it hangs in my office as a reminder. When I look at it, I am a child of God, person of worth, and that has been a good reminder because my life resembles this mosaic, and I know yours does too. And
Absolutely.
frankly, talking football for just a second, our teams right now resemble a lot of broken pieces. I did think, what if we changed coaches or just traded for a couple of weekends?
You know what? That might actually not be a bad idea.
We could solve this problem because for once we're both kind of in misery. I mean, you never had that your whole lifetime until recently, right?
No,
I suffered for my entire life until recently, and now we're back down in the basement.
Yeah, and I don't know what seriously, what would be worse? Is it, wow, this is some of the worst seasons the Gators have ever had consecutively?
Yeah.
Or is it you had a taste of the mountaintop?
Right.
And now you got to go. Yeah, now you're back down. I don't know what it would be.
We won 10 games once, and I was like, "We've arrived." And no, now I hope we win 4.
Yeah,
maybe
that's
3.
4 would be generous for the Gators. That's what I'm going to say.
So our season's in shambles already. 2 games in. Well, life could be a lot like that. And the Apostle Paul wrote this letter to these folks who were living in Thessalonica during the first century.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned in my message a couple of weeks ago, I was able to travel in that region and see some of the culture that was there, and I really learned so much. We traveled to, I think, 11 different port cities. We didn't make it to Thessalonica, but we were all around that same area and really could kind of grasp what the culture was like in the first century. And it was a wild scene.
Yeah.
I mean, immorality was running rampant. People were all focused on themselves.
Yeah.
Pleasure, money, everything they could do to take advantage of one another. A very self-absorbed culture. And to me, it helped make the Bible just really come alive, especially this little letter.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't writing it to a bunch of, pure, some group of Amish or people that kind of isolate themselves and look for holiness, and they just happen to worship a lot of different gods or something. No. These were folks that were really, really, really lost.
Yes.
And so I think his message probably was even more controversial and
absolutely
shocking in those days than it ever would be for somebody in our culture in this day and time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it when you look at the culture, it was a culture of indulgence.
Yes, that's a good way to say it.
So much indulgence of the self, physical, social. I mean, we could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so the selfless nature of what Paul writes also really stands out. It's not about indulgence, but it's about surrender.
Yeah.
And it's about looking to God to fulfill and not to the human need to fulfill.
Yeah.
And there's this interesting piece when you think about it of so when he writes about hope and when he writes about especially like the return of the Lord.
Yeah.
What he's doing is he's not trying to drop I joked about the Wordle, and I know we'll get to that example.
Yeah,
But God's not trying to God's not trying to speak through Paul and give them a puzzle to be solved about when's he coming back and when's this going to happen.
Right.
Like that's such an Americanized recent thing that we've turned it into. The purpose of him writing about that, the purpose of him talking about there is a day where the Lord will return and be ready, was to encourage them to stay on mission and to give them hope. And in the face of all the collision of culture, but also the persecution they were facing, persecution that we can't even begin to is the American church today. We talk about our own struggles. We have struggles, sure, but we can't compare to the persecution they were facing then, No.
Not only were they countercultural, they were being killed and put to death due to their faith. So when they ask about Jesus' return and what happens after you die, they're really interested in that because their loved ones, some of them that they knew and were a part of that first church in that town that spread and exploded, some of them were casualties in that persecution and martyred for their faith. And so this was a very relevant letter for them at this particular time.
Absolutely. And to think about the breakdown. So I talked about this yesterday. So the first kind of 3 chapters are a celebration of their faithfulness and their fruitfulness.
Faith, love, and hope, right?
Yes. And it was hey, keep going. You're doing God's doing amazing things through you. But then it wasn't just keep going. Chapters 4 and 5 are about keep growing.
Yeah.
And so when he lists these, as we talked about for the past couple weeks, these holy lenses that we wear, we got to view these through the lens of Christ. He's encouraging them to grow in these areas. So he's writing this, talking about hope and death and the resurrection of Christ and his return as a way to encourage them to keep growing, keep on following God, keep on having the faith, keep on going. He's not dropping breadcrumbs to try to get like I got to figure out exactly when this happens.
Yeah.
Jesus dealt with that pretty well when Jesus said, I don't even know the day or the hour.
Right.
Done.
No, but they needed the assurance.
They needed the assurance he was coming.
That's right.
Yes.
And that the loved ones that they had lost, they were going to be raised from the dead and they would see them again someday. So this was a relevant letter, even more so than probably we can even imagine.
Absolutely.
And he does shift in those last 2 chapters to challenging them to grow. Yeah. And I love how he says, you've been doing this.
Yeah.
But go for it even more. You're just getting warmed up, and you keep reminding us in your messages. There's always more.
Yeah.
As soon as you think you found what it looks like to be a child of God, person of worth, as Sherry reminds me with this cogpal thing on here. I mean, I heard that 24 years ago, and I'm discovering more about it today.
Yeah, and the most tender part of writing the sermon for me, the mosaic was a piece of it, just kind of visualizing Jesus' hands and doing that with my life. Yeah. But the other piece, truthfully for me, was talking about that deeper growth that continues. I grew up at Grace Church, and a lot of the people that it's this weird thing. A lot of people I get to have the privilege of preaching to and sharing with are like the people who were the examples and still are the examples of faith to me today. So it's this weird seat I sit in of who am it's this humility of who am I to share anything about anything with anyone that these people I look up to who've been examples of faithfulness.
Right.
And I have this gratitude for them, but also this, as I said yesterday, this plea of hey, never grow complacent and never grow too prideful or ego or have too much hubris to think I've got nothing more to grow in.
Right.
And it's sometimes if we're going to talk about fire, I equate it's like either the flame goes out completely, that's complacency, right? And apathy, I got no desire, what's the point? Nothing's happening, nothing's growing. Or I would say the fire sometimes, it's not so much of God's fire, it's our own fire.
Right.
And it burns to the point of we have no room for God because we say, well, I've got it all figured out. I know everything. Right. I've read those verses. I've read that text. I've done this thing. I've lived long enough. Whatever the case may be. It's the truth is no, our finite mind, our human mind, in our struggle with sin and being on this imperfect planet, there is so much more that God has for us to grow and so much more that we can learn. And I pray that I would not be on either end of that spectrum, that I would say somewhere in the middle of not being complacent, but also not being filled with too much pride to to allow God to continue to work and grow and mold me.
Yeah. And you do face a unique challenge in that this is your home and these are your folks. And so, Paul's letter to Timothy might be a comfort to you,
Right.
And you're living that out about not letting anybody looking down on you because you're young, but continuing to be an example.
Yeah.
And so you're challenging me and all of us to live even more into this goodness, this life to the fullest by embracing these essentials that God has for us. So let me ask you real quick before we dive into the passage, was there a time that you felt that you were kind of growing a little stagnant, a little complacent in your faith, in your long journey?
Yeah, I would say, interestingly, I think this happens for me on, I'll call it a micro level and a macro level. Okay, so there's micro levels where this happens a decent amount of just kind of like, over a span of a week or 2 weeks of kind of like, it's just been kind of, I've gone through the motions, or my schedule's been a little too loaded. And so those are moments where I need to absolutely break and go, all right, I either got to start a new rhythm, I got to reinstill an old rhythm, or I gotta get some time away to be with God, and then that fire ignites. So these do happen on micro levels. I'd encourage us there of like, don't wait 3 months as the flame's going out to do something. Like notice it after a week or two. So I would encourage us there. This happens on micro levels. But for macro levels, I would say for me, probably right before COVID and kind of leading into that time and the pandemic and lockdown, there was something in me that just it was one of those like something's not right, and I can name 3 parts of that, but I can't name the other 10. And that was when I was introduced to EHS. We had it upcoming for a sermon series we were doing, and I wasn't leading teach team, but I was just a member of it. And so we said, "Hey, read this book." And so I, actually during the lockdown, I had said, "All right, well, I'm gonna read it." And I found myself going into it like, "Well, let me read it so I know what's coming up for the sermon." But it ended up being this like, wow, I read the first chapter and then I went and bought the workbook. So I could have the questions for it. And then I found myself reading a chapter every 2 days. And taking time to journal and process and think about things. And so for me, I would say like leading up to that time, there was a bit of stagnant. Now, life circumstances, I'm sure a lot of us maybe during the early part of that pandemic felt this a little bit. But for me, that was a time where it really did feel a little like, ooh. Like kind of going through the motions and, well, what's next? I don't even know. I can't point to any major breakthrough I've had with God. It was kind of this mundane feeling. Then you have the pandemic on top of that, but really EHS was kind of the thing that reignited it. In a painful way, in a hard way, because EHS is beautiful, but it's painful work.
It is. It's hard work. And the resource we're referring to is called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. It's a book written by Pete Scazzaro, and there's a workbook that goes with it, and then there's a devotional guide.
We'll put this in the show notes too. We'll put the links to all this stuff.
That'll be great. Y'all can find it right there. And that about the same time I did the same thing. I picked up the daily devotion guide and needed it. And I think we can all relate to these moments, these micro moments that you call them, and then these macro moments, And the most important thing is not to, to beat ourselves up or just to sit and wallow in our misery. It's to get back to the fire. Because the coals, I remember my dad used to take us camping, and he would sometimes get up and leave early in the morning, probably go get some coffee. And my friend and I would go back to the campfire from the night before, and we could most of the time reignite that fire just by blowing on it and putting the coals back together. And the same thing happens in our spiritual life, that fire can return if we nurture it and if we give it the oxygen, if we give it the things that it needs for us to kind of get reignited. Now, this is not an emotional kind of thing all the time. It's more of a spirit thing. It's more of a decision of the will to, as you kept saying yesterday, we got to submit. We've got to humble ourselves to be open to these things.
And sometimes we get in a dangerous place when we wait for the emotional piece to kick in.
I'm very
like even
much.
I know we're kindred spirits in that way. Like even I'll give a real time example. So as I'm preaching about discipline, the example I named of like maybe you need to go to bed earlier so you can get up, or maybe you can go to bed earlier so you can get up earlier in the morning. Like that was real for me. And so this morning I went to bed last night and I had my alarm set for an hour earlier than normal. Because for me, like I have to, I've gotten to this place where like I have to do a workout, like whether it's on a bike or whether it's strength or whatever. Like I have to do a workout, and I need solitude with God, and I need time in Scripture. Like those three things. If I don't get the three, it's bad Taylor. Nobody wants to be around that Taylor.
Yeah.
If I get all three and I get my mind right, my heart right, like then I'm okay. Like I really am. I'm good. And so for me, my alarm went off. Gemma had gotten up earlier last night, so I had to walk her back to her room, and that was like 3 a.m. And so the alarm goes off, and there is not a thing in me that felt emotionally like, oh, I can't wait to wake up right now and get up and lift weights, and then there's not a part of me that felt emotionally ready, but yet I'm like, oh, I gotta get up, I gotta do this.
Yeah.
And for me, it was totally candid. It was like, I just preached about this. I got practice what you preach. Oh my goodness, I got to get up.
Sometimes I think God called me to be a preacher because I need it the most.
So you do your own messages, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Without that, I don't know. I'll probably be the worst church member in the world.
Oh, I would. Yes, absolutely.
And so this is what God did to keep me thriving.
Because we need the most accountability. Because we preach it, we got to do it.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So I got up and I did it, and sitting here now at almost lunchtime, I can be like, I'm so grateful I did that.
Yeah.
And I can't wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if I only waited until I felt, oh, I'm ready to do this. I feel emotionally ready. I'm excited. I feel happy. Guess what? I might never have started.
Yeah.
So like that's the, and I know that's not necessarily like it's not the flame going out of my faith or anything like that, but that's a real example of that kind of thing. If we can't just wait for the emotional piece to kick in.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to just go, no, this is something I know is good and I have to do it.
Yeah, and that's where this last message was really designed for Christ followers, and it's designed for people who want to submit our lives under the leadership and lordship of Jesus, which means sometimes the leader tells the followers what to do, and you talked to us about our primary calling.
Yeah.
And that's what this call comes back to. Is what you were doing today was being obedient to your primary calling. So explain what that is, just in case somebody needs a refresher. What is our primary calling as followers of Jesus?
Yeah, so our primary call as followers of Jesus, it's in the name, it's to follow Jesus.
Amen.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like point blank. This is what it is. The first thing we are to do, the most important thing, the priority thing we are to do is to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And with that comes a couple different misconceptions. And I didn't have a chance to preach about this.
Oh, okay.
The first is like, well, it means I have to say yes to Jesus one time and then
we're good.
Kind of our idea today of like, oh, I got to say yes, I got to repent, turn toward. Yeah, we have to say yes the first time.
Right.
But when we say follow Jesus, this does not mean just a one-time yes and then we kind of coast the rest of life. This is an everyday, every moment decision to follow him. Yeah. And I think that's an important caveat of when we say to follow Jesus, it's not just, God's not just looking for the initial yes and move on. It's a matter of us following him with our lives. When we look at the original disciples, they literally followed him. The invitation of Jesus it wasn't a figurative one-time yes that they gave him. Jesus was literally asking them to drop their things and follow him, walking behind him, learning from him, doing as he did.
Yeah.
And so there's a piece of that I want to make sure we understand there. That it can be easy, even writing it, people can easily be like, oh, well, thanks, preacher. I'm glad you spent 15 minutes talking about that part and not diving into 1 Thessalonians. Yeah. If we don't get that first part right, though, nothing else will matter.
No, because I break it down into like rule following, earning God's love, trying to look good to other people, making other people happy, all those kind of things.
Yes.
And I miss the whole point.
Yes, absolutely. And this, for my story for years, it's been that. It's been, I want to please people. I want to do this thing because they want me to do it. I want to do this thing because I think I might be good at it, and I might get a good job or an attaboy or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like I was doing all these things and I missed the greater purpose. So the greater purpose is not my own fulfillment or my own accolade or my own thing.
Yeah.
Our calling is about following after Jesus, the person of Jesus, and all that we do and all that we are. And it's ironic, isn't it, that the calling we have for us is actually like we give ourselves up of any authority.
Yeah.
Isn't it ironic of that?
It
like
is.
like it's a surrender in that call.
Yeah.
Like we're following after someone. We're not doing our own thing or paving our own way.
Isn't it funny? The invitation, really, in simple terms, is give up.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that's
It
the
is.
first step. If you're at
Yeah.
the end of your rope today on some issue, time to give up. Wave the white flag.
Yeah.
Say, Jesus, I'm going to follow you now.
Yes.
I've tried this my own way.
Yes.
And in that chapter that you helped us unpack, he does get very specific, the Apostle Paul,
Yeah.
to help his friends
Yes.
know how to just live this out. Because, we say following
Yes.
Jesus. Okay, well, I get that. That means
Yeah.
he's leading my life. But what does that actually look like? And I love what you said, maybe because we've both been to marriage counseling, and you talked about your premarital counseling.
Yeah.
And they gave you the same rules that they gave me.
Okay,
And
yeah,
that was never say always, never,
Yep.
don't use these giant things, and I'm not even I'm too afraid to mention them on a podcast that my wife could hear.
Oh right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. My
yeah.
wife listens too, so we're not gonna
We're not going to go there.
We won't
But,
go there.
Yeah, we don't want to say always and make these grandiose statements
Mm-hmm.
and avoid those. However, in this passage, Paul writes to these people he dearly loves who are putting their lives on the line, and he's put his life on the line for them, continually is doing that. And what word does he use? Always be joyful. Never stop praying. Be thankful in all circumstances. Why do you think he takes such a grandiose stand on this?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this yesterday. Of it's easy to read that and to go, oh, that's Paul being Paul,
Yeah.
right? Like you kind of write it off to go. He obviously knows that I'll never be able to do never. I'll never be able to do always.
Yeah, we'd use the same words to discount his very word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We would literally do the same thing to discount it.
That's true.
But what if we follow Jesus, right? If we get this call right, shouldn't that be our aim?
Yeah.
Shouldn't our aim be to always be joyful? That nothing, no matter what we go through, because of the love and power of Christ in us, can shake our joy. And I'm not talking about like the flippant statements of like, like someone takes too long with our coffee order or whatever happens, and we go, oh, I'm remaining joyful today. Like I'm not talking about like kind of swatting those things away, but what if we follow Jesus and guess what? We can become like him and not let our joy be shaken by sometimes smaller things and even bigger things.
Yeah.
You've seen it too. People recently who've been going through really hard, difficult things.
Yeah.
Who, while in their grief, are still saying it's well with my soul.
Yeah.
And have a joy of the Lord.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're ready to sing rainbow and sunshine songs for an hour.
Right.
But they're still joyful.
Yeah.
And so when Paul writes that, I don't think he's writing that to like Paul being Paul, writing it knowing he knows no one's going to do it.
Yeah.
No. Paul understands that following Jesus, when we follow him, we can become like him. We can mirror the things that he does. Does it mean we will be perfect? No. Does it mean we will be Jesus? No.
Right. But we will be, and this is what you were talking about yesterday, it will lead to a wholeness.
Exactly.
So strangely enough, ironically enough, when I say, okay, I give up, I quit leading my life.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you now, Jesus. He goes, okay, here's what I want you to do. And we're like, well, I don't know. But in the end, it leads to this wholeness. And you unpack that with talking about community, discipline, and growth. And those are some of the ingredients in there. Now, the community, I have heard you preach on that, and I am all in on that one. The one I tripped myself up on, and I think we've been talking about this already, is the word discipline.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear that word, I just don't get that warm, fuzzy feeling like I want to have, even when it comes to Jesus. This doesn't feel like we're singing, how great is our God, or, one of the great anthems of the faith.
Right.
It just feels not quite as fun.
Yeah.
And so you talked about discipline being connected to discipleship.
Yeah.
So say a little bit more about that as it relates to us stepping into this wholeness once we give up control.
So when we talk about discipline, I think a lot of the time we take the negative connotation of that and the negative definition we've heard, and we view discipline as like, someone messes up and they get the hand smacked, right? Or you do this and you're grounded. That's what we view discipline as. It's kind of like almost like a behavior correction, but in like a negative sense. But what discipline, another definition of what discipline is discipline is being intentional about training or rhythms or ordering your life in such a way to get a desired result.
Yeah.
That in order to go from A to B to get the result you want, you have to have discipline. You have to have order. You have to have something there in order to get there.
A structure of some kind.
A structure, yeah. And so that's the discipline we're talking about. Because when Paul says those things, always be joyful, never stop praying, be thankful in all circumstances. And that's like a classic, it hangs in offices, it's on coffee mugs. It's, that's like a classic.
Love that.
We love that. We
T-shirts,
T-shirts everywhere. Yeah, it's everywhere. That requires massive amounts of discipline.
Yeah.
Because, and I shared this yesterday, the tendency for all those things is all the negative. It's all the opposite of those.
Yeah.
It's, we're not thankful. We're thankful. We grow, discontent when the smallest of things happen, let alone being thankful in all circumstances.
Right.
And so there's these things that will happen that will automatically take us to our human nature, which is imperfect and sinful, right?
Yeah.
We'll just drift there. And so it takes discipline to do something out of the ordinary, discipline to do something countercultural.
Yeah.
And it does take, in this following Jesus, if we're a disciple, which a disciple means an apprentice, to apprentice under, to follow, it does take an intentionality and an order to continue after it.
Yeah.
And to not drift.
How many examples did Paul give in this chapter? Do you happen to know off the top of your head? I just know it was a chart full of them, and it was hard for me to pick just one that I need to grow in.
I want to say, when you total up that chunk, when you total up, I forget where
Chapter
verse
5,
chapter 5, like the second half of chapter 5.
Yeah. Even in his final greetings, he just is like rapid fire.
I want to say it's 18 different statements, like different action steps he says to take. I could be wrong on that, but I remember I think it's over a dozen.
Yeah.
It might be a couple dozen, but I want to say it's 18 different, like short to the point statements to do.
So I would say there's plenty of opportunity for us there.
Yeah.
To pick, and you said three behaviors.
Yeah.
Really dictate how your day is going to go. Mm-hmm. And I have 6 myself, and they're very similar. Yeah. And my counselor helped me come up with these, and he said, we're going to call this your personal craziness index.
Oh, I love this.
He said, if you don't do these things, you're going to feel crazy. But when you do these things, you feel like you're whole, and you just feel better about your day. And the repetition in that and actually yields far more results than what I invest in it. Yeah. I mean, some of my stuff is as simple as, have a healthy breakfast.
Right.
Well, that ain't the hardest thing in the world to pull off.
You got options here.
Yeah. And it's, it's to take a walk. It's to go to bed on time. It's these things. If I do these few things, and that's what I hear you saying about your day.
Yes.
Then they yield amazing results that we pray will, and Paul pretty much is saying that will lead to a life full of joy, full of prayerful connection to God, and gratitude in all circumstances. The interesting thing is in this is the tag he puts on it. He said, "This is God's will for you." Now, you spent a lot of years in youth ministry, and for that I am grateful, and I am grateful that your impact on my son's life. But there's a lot of other people, a little older perhaps, who still struggle with God's will.
Right.
And so what would you say to them if somebody's struggling with God's will today?
Yeah, I think to look at verses like that and to understand that it's not a puzzle or a mystery to solve.
This is the Wordle thing.
I
love that example.
Yes, yeah.
I really felt like that God's will is kind of like, and I'm terrible at Wordle.
Absolutely. I did too. And even my call to ministry, someone asked me All About Grace yesterday, tell me about that.
Yeah.
What happened on a mission trip? But even then, the gap from the high school mission trip it happened on to all right, I'm becoming a pastor. Like that was a long stretch too.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like I had this call, but it was like it was a lot of time playing Wordle. Like, oh, but what does this call mean? Does
Right.
it mean I'm gonna have a sports ministry or I'm gonna
Is it a local
do
church?
this thing,
or,
a local church?
And in what state? And,
Yes.
Yeah.
And hear me, like, is there times to discern what it specifically is that God's leading us to?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like there were times in college of like discerning between, okay, I got this option. God, like
we're at a crossroad.
where do I feel you leading me? What option do I feel you leading me to?
Yeah.
But what I saw with students is this overinflation of like, you got six like Wordle, you got 6 chances to figure out one right thing, and if you don't, it's game over.
Yeah.
And even talking to our young adults, I was talking to a young adult a couple months ago, and he was telling me about a couple business ideas he has going on.
Yeah.
And he was sharing with me, he's like, man, I just like I'm feeling so much pressure to figure out like which is the one that God wants me to do? What's the specific one He's calling me to do?
Yeah.
And he expressed after that like I'm fearful. What if I make the wrong choice? What is God going to say? What?
Right.
And I just looked at him. I said, what if God's in whatever choice you make?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what if He's not going to leave you or forsake you?
Yeah.
So what if you choose one? Do you think He's still with you? And he's like, oh, I never thought about that. I'm like
Yeah.
yeah, you know, He's still there.
Yeah.
Like he's not gonna be like, oh, you guessed, you know,
Yeah.
the wrong thing.
I always rest on a quote that the desire to please God pleases God.
Yeah.
And so when we're seeking to please God, even if we go the wrong way, He will help us out,
Yeah, absolutely.
bail us out.
Absolutely.
And since I'm a couple of years older than you, decades,
Couple
plus
years.
some older than you. We won't get into specifics, but anyway, I found that question doesn't always end, at graduation or when you land the great job or anything. It continues on in life because life continues.
Right.
And life is full of challenges and
Yes.
life is full of change and life is full of
Yes.
choices. And so we need this no matter where we are because there's always more coming back
Always.
to that.
Always.
And
Always.
we're a little pressed for time on this. Is there anything else you needed to say today about how you can encourage us from these words that Paul wrote to the Thessalonica church?
I would say one more thing for the person. I'll talk to the person who's struggling with God's will for them
There
or
we go.
calling or anything
That's
like
good.
that.
That's probably a lot of people.
I would say, in addition to seeing verses like that and understanding it's not a puzzle, to understand that God is with you in whatever you're in.
Yeah.
If it's your greatest struggle, He's with you. If it's your greatest mountaintop moment, achievement, joy, He's with you. And He is with you in discerning what next step to take, what transition to take, whatever it might be in your life that you're facing. But to understand that no matter what any of that is, your primary call does not change.
That's right.
The main reason you exist on this planet is the same. It does not change. It will not waver. And it's to follow Jesus.
Yep.
Not a one-time yes. So we're not just talking about that. Yes, the first yes is important. Saying yes to Jesus.
Yeah.
We invite you all to do that. It's a life of following Him.
Yeah.
In every moment, in every day of saying, I'm choosing to walk behind Jesus and not behind someone or something else to lead me. That's it.
Yeah, and the sense I get from these big words that he uses, always, all, never stop, is it's a lifetime of yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it's every moment of every day being willing to say to Jesus, okay, yes.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling with God's will, you taught us yesterday to always be joyful, never stop praying, be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong in Christ Jesus. So there's 3 things to hang your hat on while you discern and seek to follow whatever the new future is.
Like, what if you started there?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to
Yes,
figure
sir.
out what the career is or
Right.
what the next job is or what,
Right.
like, what if your will, you just started there?
Yeah. Wherever you end up, it's going to be amazing.
Exactly. Imagine what
Yeah.
you might be deciding between this major or that major, or this career or that career, this
Yeah.
job or that job, or this house or that house.
Right.
But if you live a life of always being joyful, never stop praying, and be thankful in all circumstances.
Yeah.
No matter what home, job, career, major you end up with, it's gonna be pretty
Yeah.
good.
And in fact, might find that the whole atmosphere around us changes in our present circumstances, and we don't have to
Exactly.
change anything or
Exactly.
move anywhere or do anything different. Well, this has been great, and this letter had such an impact on the first century church that they were credited with helping so much of the growth take place in faith in Jesus. And I just learned there's an author named Larry Sidentop, who is a professor at Oxford University in England, and he wrote a book called Inventing the Individual, and he credits a moral revolution that took place in the first century in this region to change the world.
That's
And so when
incredible.
the secular historian goes back and looks, he goes, wow, something happened in Thessalonica around 50 A.D. What
Incredible.
could it be? It wasn't that Rome named Caesar to be a god.
Wow.
It wasn't a certain invention. It was this humble group of obedient yet joy-filled, grace-filled, thankful, praying at all times, followers of Jesus.
Wow.
And they found that their world changed as their hearts were transformed. So thank you, Taylor, for
Incredible.
You actually put this whole series together for us. Thank you for organizing
Pastor
that.
Larry, too. Pastor Larry.
And Pastor Larry gave
had
us
a
the
lot-
first
yeah.
draft of this
Yes.
right at our teaching
Yes.
team retreat.
Yeah.
And you've helped shepherd us
Yeah.
through this whole letter, and grateful to you and Larry and
Yeah.
Sherry and Kip and Taylor and
Yep.
Casey and the whole teaching team. We are
Yeah.
so blessed to be able
Yeah.
to do this together, and we're blessed to be able to do this with you. And it's our joy to be with you here at Grace Church. And we do have some things coming up. Please check
Yes.
the links that are in this video. And then also check out our website for emotionally healthy spirituality.
Yeah.
We do have a course
Sounds good.
coming up.
Yeah,
and
October.
So in October, it's coming right up. So you still have time to sign up for that. Most of all today, we pray that you would know that you are seen, wanted, and loved by God and also us.
Yeah.
So may God bless you and keep you today. Until we meet again, have a great day.